You read the title. Yes, studying kanji is a waste of time. Let me explain. Now, why is it that most people are terrified of Japanese? Kanji. Yeah, everyone's scared of kanji. You've probably heard people be like, oh, Japanese? Yeah, that language is crazy. They have like 9 million characters or something, and each of those characters can be read in like 80 different ways. I heard it takes like 212 years to learn, and that's just to a basic level. It seems like the fear around specifically learning kanji is just a little bit overblown, and I'm here to tell you that it's still pretty hard actually. But it's not as hard as you think it is. The reason why so many people struggle with kanji specifically is because they've been told to use methods which are just straight up inefficient. Like, if you've ever been to a Japanese class, then they probably gave you a sheet of paper with a list of individual kanji on it and all of their stroke orders and readings, and then the teacher said, learn these by our quiz next week. Now, this is an extreme example, and if you've spent any time self-studying, then you know that classroom curriculums are super slow, and honestly, if you're going to try to rely solely on a class, you would probably never actually get to the point of being able to read real Japanese. At least not without looking up every other word. Even with some of the resources that are popular nowadays, like remembering the kanji or wanikani, which I know a lot of people will swear by, there's a fundamental flaw that makes most people who study kanji waste way more time than they need to. Look at this kanji. It's notorious for having tons of readings to the point where Japanese people like to use sentences like this to quiz foreigners. This is one of those things that makes people say Japanese is such a hard language. Even Chinese, which is where Japan got all of these characters from in the first place, at least for the most part, has consistent readings for each individual character, so once you learn a character, you should know how to read it pretty consistently. When learning kanji in Japanese, so many people will go to learn an individual character, learn all of the radicals used in the character, learn the abstract meaning of it, learn all of the readings for the character, and then see a new word that uses it and still not know how to read it. So you might be thinking, okay, how are you supposed to know which reading of the character to use then? Here's the thing, you don't. You just have to know it. Which begs the question, why are people still studying individual kanji when they could just learn the words that the kanji are used in? Like, if you think about it for a second, if instead of spending all of your time memorizing the abstract meaning of a single character and all of its different readings and radicals and then doing that thousands of times for each character and instead just learned words as you came across them, then you're gonna get to the same end goal just a lot quicker and a lot easier, and without so much pointless memorization. If you want to actually become able to understand written Japanese at some point, then you're going to have to learn tens of thousands of words anyway, so why not just skip the dedicated kanji study and just memorize vocab from the start? I should also mention really quick that this is about learning how to read the characters, not learning how to write them. It's not really the most practical idea to spend all of your time and energy learning how to write kanji, which you can't even read yet in most situations. So you're going to save yourself a ton of time and effort if you just wait until you're already fluent in the written language before going back and learning how to write. This is why you shouldn't spend your time learning stroke order or radicals, because if you're just trying to read the characters, then they're not really going to be that much help to you. Maybe knowing a radical might help you distinguish one kanji from another one, but honestly, the payoff for learning specific radicals isn't really that much when you're considering just learning how to read the characters, so if you're only learning how to read, then I wouldn't bother messing with stroke order or radicals yet. So one of the reasons that I came to this conclusion is that I actually tried doing dedicated kanji study towards the beginning of learning Japanese, and I was using RTK for this. It felt like no matter how many kanji I tried to brute force into my head, nothing was sticking, it was really boring, it didn't feel like it was helping, and eventually I just gave up and started learning vocabulary with Anki. I found that just memorizing words by themselves and spending enough time with the language was enough for me to learn how to read Japanese eventually. And I sort of had this realization that studying kanji individually is just a huge waste of time. Now I can already hear the keyboards of the people in the comments typing, but wait a minute, you can't just say studying kanji is useless. My Japanese teacher said this, or I learned kanji like this. You can't just say that your method is better than everyone else's. What proof do you have? So other than the fact that I literally learned to read kanji without ever studying it, take it from this guy. He's a Japanese teacher who's gotten pretty popular on YouTube recently, and I actually think his videos are super helpful, specifically for people who are in that intermediate stage who know a lot of Japanese but maybe haven't picked up on a lot of the nuances yet. Now a while back he made this video.
Oh shit, there's so many kanji. Thousands of kanji, and each kanji usually has more than one reading. How can I remember all the kanji? Dude, you don't need to study kanji to learn Japanese, just learn vocabulary. Even if you memorize all the readings of all the kanji there, you still wouldn't be able to read Japanese. A reading of the first kanji is O, Ko, Sho, 小さい. And the second one is 学, 学ぶ. And the last one is 生きる, 生, き, 生, 小. Yeah, so even if you learn all the kanji out there, it's useless. You still wouldn't be able to read a word.
When I saw this video for the first time, I was honestly thinking, oh my god, somebody finally said what I've been thinking this whole time. So if you don't believe me when I say don't study kanji, then take this guy's word for it. Okay, so I've talked a lot about words and using vocabulary as a means to learn kanji. But what does this process actually look like? So first you need to find some way to reliably learn words, and I highly recommend using Anki for this. But if you really don't like Anki to the point where it just makes you want to give up and quit, then it's not necessary, and a lot of people commented on my last videos that they don't like Anki, so if you don't want to use it, then you don't have to, but I think the benefits strongly outweigh the negatives, so I would highly recommend it. While you're learning words, you're also going to want to be reading as much as you can, because reading is really what's going to solidify your knowledge. These two activities really complement each other, so you're going to be making a lot of progress if you're practicing reading and memorizing vocab on the side at the same time. Not literally while you're reading, you're doing your Anki reps, but you know what I mean. When you first start looking at kanji, they're going to look like a bunch of random scribbles to you, and you're not really going to be able to tell the difference between them that easily. But the more words you learn and the more time you spend trying to differentiate kanji, they're going to become more and more clear to you. When you've picked up a few thousand vocabulary words and you're becoming more and more familiar with the written language, you're going to automatically notice yourself being able to guess the readings of kanji and words that you've never even seen before, just because you know those same characters from other words which you've already learned. At the point I'm at now with Japanese, most of the new words that I learn are composed of kanji which I've seen many times already, so it's usually not difficult to guess how they're read, despite never having seen them before. So now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, hold on. Just a second ago you said that you just have to know it, or else you don't know how to read a kanji. So how are you guessing how they're read? What's up with that? Well, what I said is still true. You can never be 100% sure without just looking it up in a dictionary. But there are some things you can do to drastically increase the chance that you guess the reading of a word. Alright, now it's time for class. Everybody sit down and look at the whiteboard. Kanji have what's called kunyomi and onyomi, which are essentially just specifications for which reading is used based on the origin of a word. Kunyomi are for reading native Japanese words, and onyomi are for words which were imported from Chinese. For example, if you stuck two kanji together like this, there's a high likelihood that it's a Chinese loanword and will be read with the onyomi reading. If you see a word with okurigana, which is just when a word itself has grammar inflection built in, then it's almost always going to be read with the kunyomi reading, as it's almost certainly an original Japanese word. Knowing this can help you make educated guesses on how a word is going to be read, but there are many exceptions to this rule, so you can never be 100% sure without confirming it for yourself. Look at this word, meaning tone of voice. Now, if you're like me and you're learning Japanese and you come across this word for the first time, you might make the reasonable assumption that, oh, this could be read as seishoku, because grammatically it's treated the same as a Chinese import word, so it most likely uses the onyomi reading, right? Yeah, it's actually pronounced as kawairo, which uses two kunyomi readings, the first of which is not even how the word in isolation is pronounced. This sort of thing isn't super rare with normal words, but it is really common with the names of people or places, so even Japanese people will often not know how to read a name that they've never seen before. Because kanji were invented by the Chinese, then brought into Japan over 1,000 years ago and forced into the Japanese language, then underwent tons of changes due to historical events, learning kanji is kind of convoluted to say the least. But if you take the approach of just spending a lot of time with the language and learn vocabulary words as they come up, then you're steadily going to learn to read kanji without having to study them at all. Okay, to show you what I mean, let's look into my Anki deck. I currently have 15,244 words in my deck. And there's actually this really cool add-on called Kanji Grid, which will generate a grid of all of the kanji found in your Anki deck. And by looking at this, you can kind of gauge how many characters are in the words that you know how to read. This isn't really that helpful on a pragmatical level, because really the only way forward is to learn more words. But you can sort your known kanji by JLPT level, kanji kente level, grade level, and so if you're trying to gauge where you're at, then it can be a little bit helpful, I think. To be honest, I think it's just cool to see a big grid of all of the kanji that are in your deck right in front of you and think, wow, I really learned to read all of those just by learning words. There's also this game that got popular on Japanese YouTube like a year ago called Kanji to Go, which is essentially just a game where you guess kanji readings, and the farther in you go, the harder it gets. So much to the point where Japanese people even struggle on the harder levels.
語彙の意、むにゃむにゃ読む声、読書する声なんですよ。でも、訓読み知らない。 いに繋がらないな。なんだもったいね。なんだよ、これ。あ、威圧の方。作り笑い。おいおい、マジかよ。
I think the fact that this game even exists in the first place is a telling sign that you shouldn't be learning individual kanji to learn vocabulary words. Honestly, I played this game way too much sitting in the back of my college classes when I should have been taking notes. But that's not important. What's really important is that, hey, this game is pretty cool. If you're trying to learn how to read some unorthodox kanji and test yourself, then maybe go give it a shot. It's kind of neat. Anyways, if you're trying to learn how to read Japanese, don't bother studying kanji. Now, originally I was going to make this a huge comprehensive guide on how to read, but I realized that the contents of a video specifically about kanji and the contents of a video about learning how to read novels are probably not that similar, so I decided to split them into 2 videos. So if you have a bunch of questions about specifically learning how to read, then I'm making a video about it, don't worry. Anyways, that's about it. Leave any comments you have in the question. Oh my god. Leave any questions you have in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Okay, bye.